おはようございます。まず私を招待していただきありがとうございます。私は興奮して満足している。次に、私は日本が大好きです。去年の8月、私は北海道と東京に行ってきました。ひまわりはとてもきれいです。ドラえもんとてもかわいいです。寿司とラーメンはとても美味しいです。I really love Japan. 私はウィンストンです。どうぞよろしくお願いします。それは私の Twitter です。私はシンガポールから来ました。フライトは約6時間かかりました。10年前、私は日本語を学びました。しかし、私は長時間練習しませんでした。たくさん忘れました。だから、ここから英語を使います。ごめんなさい。Alright, so that's all the Japanese you'll hear for today from me. I hope it wasn't that bad. I practice a lot actually. Okay, so a little bit more about myself. I'm currently running my own software consultancy. It's called Jolly Good Code, which is only me, myself. And at the moment, I do Agile and Ruby on Rails training and development work, mainly in Singapore. Recently, I've also started this website called rubyasia.com. It's actually a fortnightly curated newsletter for Ruby news and articles from around Asia. So think of Ruby Weekly, but which is focused on Asia content. So it's been running for 2 months already. I have 4 issues out on the internet. I actually featured some articles from some of you guys. So if you write about Ruby, even if it's in Japanese, please send me your blog link so that I can share with the subscribers of this newsletter. Next issue will be out the week after, so watch out for it. At the same time, I'm also the organizer of Red.RubyConf, which is the annual Ruby conference in Singapore. This year is happening on June 26 and 27, which is a Thursday and Friday. Last year, Akira Matsuda-san and Hiroshi Shibata-san were actually there to speak at the conference, and I believe they had a great time. So this year, Aaron Patterson and Koichi Sasada-san will also be there. So I hope to see more of you guys there as well. Please check out the website at red.rubyconf.com. I also run the monthly Ruby meetups in Singapore, so you should be able to find us easily on meetup.com. Singapore Ruby Group was actually started in 2006 by a small group of Ruby on Rails enthusiasts who would meet on an ad hoc basis to chit-chat about Ruby on Rails over a cup of coffee. Over the years, as Ruby as Rails grew in popularity, the meetup group also grew in size. But unlike Japan, which is really big, Singapore is really small. So up until now, we only have one Ruby group in Singapore. We meet once a month, usually on a Tuesday, and our average attendance is about 50 people. So for every meetup, we have about 2 to 3 talks of about 20 minutes each, and we also have pizza sponsored by companies like PayPal and even Engine Yard Tokyo. So thank you very much, Engine Yard, if any one of you posts for Engine Yard. So some photos taken at our meetup is not very clear, but Sao Xiong, who is speaking, is a long-time member of the Singapore Ruby community, and he's also the author of several books, one of which has been translated to Japanese recently. It's called Exploring Everyday Things with R and Ruby. So if you're interested in R, you might want to check out the book. More photos. So the last photo over here is actually interesting. There's no one speaking, or actually there's someone speaking, but it was a remote talk via Skype by PJ of Engineer. So you also know that this is a different location, so we rotate around different locations to make it convenient for people working in different areas to attend. And more photos at a different location. So at every meetup, we'll actually have a talk called 5 Random Ruby Tips. And as the name suggests, It's a simple 5-minute presentation about 5 short and random Ruby tips. Personally, I found these tips to be really useful, and so that became the inspiration for my talk for today. I compiled some of these random Ruby tips shared at our meetups, and I hope you'll find some of these useful as well. I've added Rails in small print because some of these are specific to Rails, and I'm guessing that most of us have tried Rails at some point before, I hope. So let's carry on with the Ruby tips. And let's start with something simple. So underscore as last return value. So I'm sure most of you would know this already. If you're in IRB and you want to get the last return value, you can use underscore. So you can see that on this line, I'm using the underscore, and so I could get underscore assigned to the last return value assigned to string. And when I use string, it becomes hello world. Underscore can also be used as a separator. So looking at the first line, when n equals to 5 million, doesn't really read well. But you can actually put underscore into the 5 million, and the numbers actually still the same, but it helps in readability. So this is a great trick if you are handling numbers with a lot of zeros or a lot of numbers in it. Next is actually about array initialization. So I've seen this code a couple of times where you would check whether this element is an array or not. If it is, you would try to do something to it. If not, you'll try to do something else. But you could actually initialize it to become an array and just operate on the element as if it's an array. So if X is an array, if X is not an array and a single element, it will be converted to an array if you are using this. And if X is an array, it will not do anything, but still treat it as an array. So it helps to clean up your code. This is the hash default. So most of us should know this, that if you use .new with the default symbol, or not symbol, but default value, right? When you do like hash something not found, you should be able to get back default. Another way of retrieving values from a hash is to use .fetch. But when you're doing .fetch, it doesn't give you the default value. It throws an error instead. So how do we get the default value if we're using .fetch? So it's actually pretty simple. What you can do is to put it as a second parameter to the .fetch, and if it doesn't find the symbol or the value that you're looking for, the key that you're looking for, it will return default. Otherwise, you could also use the block syntax over here, which you could actually retrieve the key that you were trying to use and use it in the default value if you want to as well. Hash map. So let's say we have this problem, right? We want to convert A1, B2 to A2, B4. So how we do it? So I'm going to present like 3 methods to do this, 3 ways to do this. The first way would be to use inject. So you could operate on a new hash, and as while you look through the key and variable, you could actually do the multiplication, and at the end you get out A2, B4. So another way of doing this is to make use of, again, the hash initialization, where if you actually pass in an array of arrays of key value pairs, it will convert it into a hash. So if we break down this method into the individual code over here, you will see that what this is doing is actually getting out an array of arrays of key value pairs, which has already been transformed over here to 2 and 4. And finally, when we apply this hash square bracket hash initialization, what you get out will be A2, B4. So pretty handy. Third one is actually to use .merge. So you might be familiar with merging hash A and hash B, which will combine the 2 hashes and give you the combined values from those 2 hashes. But you can actually combine the same hash as well. So when you try and combine the same hash, you could actually use the block form, which gives you key, old value, new value, and you could work on these values however you want. So in this case, I'm not really using key and old value, I'm just using new value. So I just take new value multiplied by 2, and at the end of the day, I'll still get the same hash over here. So of course, it's a good practice if you're not really using the parameters in the block. You can use the underscore again over here. So tip 9 about case conditions. So when you're using case, case in Ruby is actually pretty powerful. I like it a lot. You could actually use integers in your case as one of the conditions. You could use string as a condition. You could use multiple values. This is actually an OR, so if you give it 2 or 3, it will print out either 2 or 3. You can use range, and finally, you can actually even use a proc. So you could, if I'm using like 20 over here, yeah, it will pass it in here. So of course, this example is pretty simple, but it opens up a lot of possibilities because it accepts a proc in here. So since we are talking about procs, this is something that have come up a lot as well. If let's say we want to map hello world, this array hello and world into uppercases or any way we want to manipulate it. So by default, this is the simplest. This is what most people would write, right? In the block form as dot uppercase, but you could also use this syntax over here, ampersand colon uppercase, where it's actually using this symbol uppercase, converting it to a proc, which would then convert it to a block that would yield this block over here, and that's why these two are essentially the same, and you will get the same result. So one good use case for this is then to apply it to like summation. So if you're using like, if you want to sum up the numbers of 1, 2, 3, 4 in this array, you could actually use dot inject and pass in ampersand colon plus as well. So that's really handy. The more interesting bits comes in because now we know you could actually pass in anything that responds to dot to proc. You can actually pass in a class that responds to this specific method. So for example, I have a star class over here that responds to dot proc, and I have a lambda over here that's trying to print out star star something star star. So what I can do is then pass it into dot map with the ampersand, and because star responds to dot to proc, it would use this method, and what you would achieve, what it would end up would be star star hello, star star world. So this is pretty interesting. Number 13. So exceptions, about exceptions. So let's take a look at this piece of code over here. What is not so good about it? So one of the things is I'm trying to rescue exception. So exception is, as we all know, we shouldn't really rescue that. Why? Because it's the mother of all exceptions, right? I think as a good practice, whenever we try to rescue exceptions, we should be more specific, like which type of exceptions we really want to capture. At the same time, another tip is we could actually simplify how we write this piece of code because the scope is essentially the entire method itself. We could then remove the begin and remove the end and just write this instead. So these two methods essentially captures the same kind of error, and you can see that I already changed it to name error over here, and it would rescue the same thing. Source location. So this is available from Ruby 1.9 and above. This is really helpful if you want to find out, like for example, dot blank, where is it located, and which line number it is on. So pro tip would be to then pass it to whatever text editor you're using, Sublime, TextMate, Vim, RubyMine, etc., to open up this file at this specific line number. So you will notice that, however, if you try and, so this only works, right, for like files that are not native in nature. So for example, most of the gems or code that you write would work with this source location over here. If you try and find out the source location for one of the native methods, it would return you nil because it doesn't really open up the C files. Reading data in a Ruby file. So I've seen this sometimes where you can actually put underscore n underscore and put some data over here. What you can do is then manipulate the data within your file itself. by calling a constant data. So what's important over here is that you can see that I'm recording the position of this data, I'm reading it, and then printing it over here. But in order for me to use it again, I need to seek where is it again, and then I can read it again. So this is something for you to note. If, for example, you want to actually reuse the data that you have defined in here, either you use this, or you should have already saved the data out here already as data.b. Command line Ruby. So Ruby is really fun. I really love Ruby, and this is something that you can do with Ruby with single line. So what is happening here is -n is actually like a while loop around your script, which is this one-line script over here, and -e will evaluate this one-liner, and $_ is actually like a kernel get, so it will get whatever is passed to this Ruby statement over here, which is the echo supersize me. So if I run this entire command, what it would return would be supersize me in uppercase. So still continuing on single line Ruby scripts, so you can actually run a Ruby server very easily just by doing this. And it will bring out a web server for your current directory. So what's interesting about this, it reads fine, right? Ruby-run-e httpd.-p8080. But actually, we should probably read it as ruby-r-un-e httpd. The reason is because -r is actually the option that you pass to Ruby to require the library before executing the script. And then in this case, the library that we are requiring is actually called the un library. It's the un.rb file, which you can find here. Inside, it contains a lot of Unix utility methods like httpd, which is one of them, and also like list, move, copy, etc. So yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that this is named in this way. I think there are other files that are named like this as well, so that when you write it, it actually reads like ruby-run or something. So take note of what we have here. Basically, it is an index, a web server that displays two files, big.txt, small.txt, with different file sizes. So take note of this because it's going to be used in the next example. So the big text file is actually of 15 kilobytes, while the small text file is of 12 kilobits. And what are we going to talk about in the next example? It's about OpenURI, 10 file, and string IO. So if I'm doing OpenURI and I'm trying to open up the big file, it actually returns me a 10 file. But if I'm opening the small file, it actually returns me a string IO. So the reason for this is because OpenURI buffer has this constant called string max, which actually is set to 10 kilobytes by default. So if any file that exceeds 10 kilobytes, it will automatically cast it as a 10 file. But if it's less than 10 kilobytes, it would be string IO, which is what you saw earlier. So in order to make sure that it's always deterministic, like if you always want 10 file, then what you can do is to remove the constant string max and set it to 0. And so if you see that we have done this, what we would get would be 10 files always. So that's how we can manipulate that. Singleton module. So there are a lot of pattern libraries actually available in Ruby itself. Singleton is one of them. So you could include singleton and then call instance on the class, and it will return you the singleton. But if you call new, it doesn't exist anymore if this is a singleton. Forwardable module, same thing, another like Ruby pattern library. So you can extend forwardable, and you can then use delegator to delegate some of the methods onto some internal data structure that you have. So in this case, what I have done is that delegate enq and deq to actually the array methods of push and shift. And I've also delegated some of these methods onto the array directly. So at the end result is I can use mq.enq and mq.deq on the myQ class itself. Bundler, so this is not a little bit related to Ruby, I guess. It's written in Ruby. And a lot of times you'll be using a lot of gems. So since Bundler 1.5 and above, you could actually use all of your machine CPUs and cores. So what you can see that when I don't use it at all, I take like 9 minutes to install my gems. If I use it, I take only 3 minutes, so a big improvement, definitely. And in order for you to find out how many like CPU cores you can use, you can run this statement, and then you can set it as a global default job within your config file, bundle config file. Other bundle commands that are pretty interesting, outdated. You can list all of your outdated Ruby gems. You can even open up an IRB console with the gem file preloaded by using bundle console. Alright, Rails tips. So we're at number 25, 6 more to go. So this is something that I've seen a lot of people forgetting about, which is that actually if you remember the syntax for this, it would help. It would save you a lot of time, like add name to product, so like add something to a table, and you can pass in the name of the column, the data type, and whether you want it to be an index or not. And what this generates is it generates the entire add column syntax for you, and even add an index. So this is a time saver most of the time. Okay. And we also have add references. So instead of like specifying add column user underscore ID, you can actually say add reference to the table and to what ID that you need. Yeah, I think I shouldn't have underscore ID here. But anyway, so what's interesting is you could also pass in index true over here, which would then generate an additional statement for add index to this column, which is something that a lot of people forgot. So then they will say that, oh, Rails is slow. Well, that's because they forgot to add an index. So of course, it will become slow, right? You can also open up a sandbox console for Rails. So you can notice that once you have done this, Rails console-sandbox, any modifications you make will be rolled back on exit. So when I start to create like a new product, it would disappear when I exit the console. Okay, number 28, rig nodes. So sometimes I will leave a lot of nodes in the Rails application to remind myself to do something. So you can do to-dos, fix me, optimize. And if you do rig nodes, what you get is the line number that disappeared in this particular file, application.rb, what is it, and the message that you have left in that file itself. But do take note that this only works, this only works for uppercase only. And if you want to retrieve like lowercase to-dos, you have to do rig nodes custom annotation equals to smaller case to-do. Yeah. Okay, so pretty here doc. So sometimes you might need to use this type of syntax over here to generate some documentation. But the indentation doesn't look really nice because you have to move it all the way to the left of the file. But in Rails, you could actually have this method called strip here dot. Yep. So you could still indent them nicely within the file itself, but when you print it, it would actually strip away the spaces over here. So very useful to actually keep the file tidy and readable. All right, last one. String inquirer within Rails itself. So this is pretty handy if you are using like enums. Actually, yeah, like enums in Rails 4.1 already, I believe is using some of these, but you can also use this method to generate your own question methods. So for example, in here, I have a method called self-is, and I'm using string inquirer.new emotion. So when I instantiate it to be Winston emotion equals happy, I can actually use this method called isHappy. if that's true. Yeah, so I'm happy because this is my last slide. So 30 tips altogether. I need to give credits to these 5 people who are the Singapore community Ruby members, because some of these like tips are actually compiled from their slides. I don't own all of them. So thank you very much to these guys, and thank you.